Okay, well, so I just want to talk a little bit about some of my first fat bike work. And it's all the fat bike boneyard is what I got going on. Lots of old pieces, and they're not in the shape they were once when I rode it. But, so this is the first, I'd say this is sort of my first fat bike. I mean, absolutely. This was, I mean, it started off with the Snowcats, you know, and then once I had the Snowcats, I had to make tires to fit the width of the rim. So I made these like 3.1s at the time, when a 2.1 was as fat as we could get, the Ritchie Z-Max. And this one was a little bit fatter, maybe like a 3.2. This one was seatbelt webbing. This one over here was a laminate with hemp canvas, and then old pieces of rubber for a little bit of traction on the belly. But this is the bike I rode in 1996. Triple butted chromoly, and I spread out the chain stays. It was a pretty rough job at it, but this was my first tinkering. Started with the tires. It had this pepperoni fork that fit fatter tires than most of the other frames. I mean forks. When I got back from Sport 96, I just kind of went crazy making different tires. I just started making different widths, 3s, some 4s, just started making fatter and fatter tires. But so I had my fat tires, but it was the same situation. I needed a fatter rim to make the tires work right. So then this is the first fat bike rim that I ever made that was actually beyond anything that was out on the market. This one's probably about 75 millimeters. It's actually, this one is a Snowcat cut in half, and then I just tack welded with a few hundred tack welds, belt of aluminum in the middle of it. And this is what got me going with the fat rims. Once I had the fat rims, well, I needed to start working on frames and forks. So I started doing what I like to call Franken forks and Franken frames. And they were just regular mountain bike chromoly forks that I'd cut, and I'd put a piece of square tubing and cap it off for some strength. First ones were done just brazed, and then I did some TIG welded ones. And once I did the forks, Franken forks, this was my red Schwinn. Well, it was red, it's red again, but this is a red Schwinn frame that I've been riding, and I sacrificed it to make it into, this was my first Franken fat bike. Bent some 4130 chromoly to make this chain stays, and I had picked up old Cunningham design elevated chainstay frame, actually in a scrap pile in Juarez, Mexico, when I was coming back from the dunes one day. And when I saw that elevated chainstay, I thought, well, I can start with that. It keeps my drivetrain clear. And so that's when I went to chopping this bike. Then I did another one, and I was doing an offset. You can actually see the offset on this one, the black one, where at the time I was putting the, well, I'd send the wheel over towards the left there, the non-drive side, to get clearance for my gears. Well, so once I had all these Franken frames and the homemade tires, homemade rims. A friend of mine by the name of Juan Pena from Juarez, fellow mountain biker, introduced me to a friend of his who was a mountain biker from Mexico City, and that was Carlo Vecchi. And he had friends at Tornell, and his uncle had the Velox of Mexico. He made all kinds of road bike and mountain bike rims, and he would roll them there at Velox. And once I met Carlo, Juan and I threw all these pieces in the back of my little Toyota truck, and we headed down to Mexico City with the early prototypes and went and met with the folks at the Tornell Tire Company, and they helped us get the tire going. They loaned us molds. We made the center mold. Went and bought scrap metal at the yard and had it cut into circles and then put it on a Bridgeport mill, and we started milling the tread pattern. The chevron design was going to be our easiest without having to use like a CNC machine, which was cutting edge technology at the time. That was in the summer of 1999, and within 2 months, actually a month and a half, we made the tire mold, had tires going. We made this inner tube that was a fatter inner tube than anything that we had for mountain bikes. This inflated up to fill the tire that's actually a 4.0. When mounted on the 82 millimeter rim, we ended up with about just a little over 3.5. It depends how you ran it with 1 or 2 tubes. If you ran it with the 2 tubes, you pretty much got the whole 4 inches out of it. And like I said, within about a month and a half, we were just working on tooling, and we had our extrusion. We had this, what I like to call the camel hump. It was this hump in the center of the rim. It kept our 2 inner tubes separate, as well as gave the rim a bunch of extra strength. This was our fork that we made there in Mexico City. Steel. It's a chromoly fork, and then this is a high carbon steel frame. This was the frame, and at the time we wanted to get all our gears, and we did this funky bend. I remember did the tooling to get this funky bend in the seat tube in order to get our derailleur over. And of course, so this also had the elevated chainstay design, and we made about at least 200, maybe 250 of these. Actually, this is one of the frames that we this was one of the ones that went to Interbike, as well as some other ones that were different colors. They had the elevated chainstay design, and these were the ones that we took to Interbike in '99, late summer of '99. And then this bike over here is the bike that it's got the 100 millimeter rims on it now, but it had the 82s on it. Had a set of wheels from the 82s, and this is the bike I rode in 2000. Or at the time it was the I Did a Sport Extreme. Dan Bull was still running it, and it was the first official race to Nome. I made it to McGrath, and my frame cracked. There were a lot of cracked frames that year. We were all experimenting with different frames, and mine cracked at the elevated chainstay, right at where the seat tube met the chain stays. Since then it's been repaired and reinforced, and it's never cracked since. That's right. But that year, Kuriak, we did a trade out. He gave me some lake boots and some cash, and I set him up with the rims and tires. And he actually took all the tread off of the tires and to lighten them up, and he rode it with no tread, made it to Nome. He didn't even drill out his rims, I don't think. Drilled out. I actually had about 100 1-inch diameter holes in my rims, front and rear, to lighten things up. I don't think he had any holes drilled in his rims. He was hauling the full weight. Pretty impressive. And with no tread. And he set the record that year that held for quite some time. I think it held for something like 13 years or 14 years. It was that year in '99 that I met Mark Gronwald and John Evingsing, and they were buying rims and tires from me. They really liked the rims. They were building up some bikes. Mark Gronwald was lacing up some nice wheels, and he was making fat bikes. Mike DeSalvo made some really beautiful fat bikes around the wheel set at the time. He was probably one of the most prolific frame builders, custom frame builders, who made fat bikes in the early days around my wheels. I've had a few times to chat and meet with Mike DeSalvo, and he's a great frame builder. I really think he deserves a lot of credit for work he did. And John Evingston made some nice frames as well. And the Moots guys made some real nice frames back in the early days. Brad and Gordon and Kent Erickson bought wheel sets from me and started making some real nice, bikes for themselves. And then Kuriak had them build them some bikes around the wheel sets. And yeah, it's just that's what I believe. That's where the actual fat started. That's when it was really getting fat, when it went beyond the 44 millimeter rim. The next steps are what led to now us riding on 80 and 100 millimeter rims with 4 and 5 inch wide tires. It's really gotten to be a fun, popular segment of the mountain bike community. Yeah, so fat bikes have really come a long way, and we're tomorrow headed off to the Fat Bike Expo that Bill and Katie Merchant are putting together in Anchorage. And that's where this thing really kicked off. I feel like a lot of the early prototype work, a great majority of it, was done right here in the desert southwest, New Mexico and northern Mexico. But the interest really took off in Alaska, especially with the Iditarod and the Iditarod Trail Invitational that Bill and Katie put on. And so we're off to the expo tomorrow.